What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Supreme Decisions Legal Minute Podcast, and I am your host, Supreme Decisions. And today, we got a couple of new things going on because, as you know, we're in the studio, so we have some grown people stuff to do, and we got a couple bills we have to pay, so we're going to start off with that. And today, we're going to talk about our first sponsor, which is Urban Gyros Mediterranean Street Food. We have your gyros, we have your bowls, we have your loaded fries. And it's El Paso's new favorite. It's the big ass taco. Hashtag celebrate flavor. Made fresh daily. It's 15500 Zaragoza Drive, Suite 202, and it's at El Paso, Texas, 79936. Again, that address is 15500 Zaragoza Drive, Suite 202, El Paso, Texas, 79936. And we also have, it might be a little bit better if I got this together prior to doing this, but we actually have someone that's very new to this. This is someone that I met about a week and a half ago, and they actually came in, and it's one of those things where they're doing something that I actually love it, simply because, so they're going to get a couple little extra things simply because. Anyway, the second sponsor is Jacob's Well Unity Church of Christ. They are located in, I believe it's, because it's not on here. Okay, I don't have the address for Jacob's Well, but we're going to do that. And what they're doing, they are a church feeding the homeless every third Sunday. And I'll get you an address because it's Jacob's Well Unity Church. I believe it's Charlotte, North Carolina. And every third Sunday at 2 p.m., they are feeding the homeless. So please come out, enjoy yourself, get a meal. Now that we've gotten the horribleness of my preparation out of the way, the one thing I want to talk about is I want everybody to kind of take a look at, or a gander, so to speak, at I'm actually lost for words right this second. But we looked at how the world completely collapsed last year. And it was literally around March of last year. And what happened during this time now, because we're almost a year after the George Floyd incident, and during that time there were a bunch of riots and a lot of BS that went on. Now I'm going to talk about parts of this later, because we looked at the instance of people were upset that, oh, well, you're making George Floyd a martyr. And the issue was, it wasn't about George Floyd. George Floyd became the face of aggravation. He became the face of irritation for the most part. And he became the face of an enormous problem. Because what happened that most people didn't talk about, most people overlooked, most people even kind of never knew about. I did a podcast right after the incident last year because the battle cry was defund the police, defund the police, defund the police, defund the police. And the fact was, George Floyd was a small monicum of issues that we're having as a country with our policing system, which falls into our justice system. Because what most people didn't even understand was George Floyd wasn't even the first person killed by police on that day. George Floyd wasn't the first person caught on video being killed by police on that day. There were 5 others, not including George Floyd, that was killed by police that were unarmed. One of those was a Marine. He was a retired Marine who was suffering from PTSD. It was in Houston, Texas. Another one was in Arizona. His name was Michael Ramos. I spoke about Ramos because you hear these people that are apologizing for police. And the one thing they say, well, why don't you stop committing crimes? If you stop committing crimes, you won't have this issue. If you stop committing crimes, police won't bother you. But we look at the young man that was in Houston. His wife called for medical help. Houston has a medical help team. Her husband didn't receive any medical help. He received agitated police officers early in the morning that advanced on a Marine who was retreating. So there was no imminent threat according to law. They killed him. Michael Ramos, they were not even looking for Michael Ramos. The suspect they were looking for wasn't even wearing the clothes Michael Ramos had on. They killed him. George Floyd, there were multiple stories of why they were called out to the scene of George Floyd. And I want to give you something after I say this. All of which, every story that came out was actually kind of debunked because first it was, oh, he was out here with counterfeit money. Never found any counterfeit money. Oh, well, he was being aggressive towards the police. Now we got video literally at the trial. He wasn't being aggressive. He was asking questions. Then they wanted to bring in an old arrest. But then that established that there was a prior relationship between Chauvin and George Floyd. But then again, all these are issues I'm going to get into later. But at the end of the day, Chauvin isn't even on trial for murdering George Floyd. But you say, but Supreme, that's what they're testifying about. No, Chauvin's on trial for how he murdered George Floyd. Again, I go back to the original podcast where I spoke about department policy only allows for that choke because it's an illegal choke. The maneuver was on his artery that's on his neck, not on the back of his neck like a lot of these idiots attempted to recreate. It's on an artery. It's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu move. Because you remember I talked about the non-lethal weapons that police are armed with, and one of those is hand-to-hand combat. Jiu-jitsu is part of that hand-to-hand combat. Well, now we're going to fast forward. Last month, there was a bill that was introduced in the 117th Congress. And it's H.R. 1280, and it's generally known as the Police Reform Bill. And in some cases, in here, when I look at it in Texas, it's called the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act of 2021. Now, when you look at it, a lot of police officers are trying to get this bill thrown out. I'm going to go through it because I want to find out what you think. I want to find out if it's something that should be thrown out because I'm going to give you something prior to even reading any of this. I'm going to give you something that I hope it makes you say, because I had an aha moment because I was one of those. I wasn't defund the police. I was reallocate how the policing is done. Because everybody that was screaming, defund the police, defund the police, defund the police, they were inviting chaos. They were accepting vigilantism. And the problem that most of us have is the lack of self-control. Most of us have an issue with objective reasoning. And when we talk about the 104 IQ score of the majority of police officers, why? Because that's the reason why I throw it out there as the McDonald's version, because we think about how bad the service is at McDonald's in many places simply because their shake machine is always broken, or they have a bunch of kids in there that are learning how to actually have their first job and do something, and then you hear something's going wrong. Why? Because you know they're not intelligent because they're kids. But these people are the exact same IQ of police officers. So why should we expect more from people that think the exact same way as somebody that's a child at McDonald's, learning how to get their job done? Now, I'm going to fast forward because, again, I had this conversation. And it was amazing because one of the things I looked at, because no matter what was introduced, because, again, all this rioting, all this looting, all this destruction, all this defund the police, defund the police, defund the police, defund the police, nobody was defunded. You had 47 or 57 officers walk off the job because they thought it was okay to not only push a protester down off the curb, but to step over him while he's bleeding out. But they say they're for the people. Atlanta had the blue flu, and this is why my conversation came up. Because one of the things I actually want to address was in this conversation. And I asked him, why? Why? Just the easy, why? Why? As my girl Val said, why? Why? And the thing that was funny to me was the fact that I'm having this conversation with this police officer. And it was right after the young man was killed at Wendy's by police. There was then a couple of police officers that were not suspended, they were actually fired. They overrode the, the request by the union, policing union. And as you can see, because it's something else I'm going to get into, in 2018, the Supreme Court allowed for individual lawsuits to go into unions. That has been exercised to a certain extent against policing unions. Why? Because policing unions are the reason most bad cops are still in place. But as you can see, over the last year, I think 13 to 14 cops have been fired, off rip, damn the police unions, and they've actually replaced 4 police union presidents. But the conversation was with an Atlanta police officer. I gave him my spiel, and he gave me his spiel. And the why was the most profound thing to me. But it was also the one thing that I look at as the actual issue. And I also know that it's the one thing that nobody addressed. It's the one thing that nobody ever addresses. Even with California having a new hiring practice of those with an education, those that have reasoning skills. This young man looked at me because I asked him, I said, why have the blue flu if you're for the people? That's what you swore your right hand to God to be. That's what you swore your right hand to God to do. Why? He looked me right in my eyes and said, they're punishing us for doing exactly what they trained us to do. Unfortunately, that pause was for shock, not for dramatic effect, because the one thing that no bill has ever, since this cry for defunding and all this other stuff has come across, have they talked about the training. These police officers were trained in a manner of not necessarily bringing someone in for paperwork, not necessarily for revenue generation. Why? Because there was one thing that was also talking about human nature. The human nature of simplicity, conformity, and it's the understanding that you look at all these protesters, all these arrests that happened during the protest. How many of these actual protesters are actually fighting back? Less than 3% thus far. The national average is 5. It is less than that for the protesting areas. The national average is 5%. 95% of people are either paying or complicit with the system. 5% of people actually fight back. 95% of the people that are fighting back actually win. Yet, in the areas of protest, the fight back amount is less than 3% thus far. Because one of the things I always talk about, it's easy for someone to be brave when there's nothing to be brave against. It's easy to be upset and holler and scream and throw stuff around and, oh, defund the police and I'm going to tear this up. But now that you have to face the consequence, how brave are you? Because again, I always do this. I know it's assholish, but it is what it is because of all the people I helped. 13 of the motherfuckers still got on the stand and said I did something wrong, even though they couldn't figure out what it was I did wrong, or they forgot that I helped them. Just flat out forgot. And they all took deals, while me and 2 of my other brothers went home free. While me and two of my other brothers went home free, they took deals because they weren't willing to fight when it actually counted. This is one of the reasons why I look at pretty much, I want to get as much information on certain things as possible. Now, going through this today, I'm actually going to read this for the first time because I have not read it. I don't know what's in it. I don't know what's not in it. I don't know. But what I am going to guess, it's assholish. I get it. It doesn't have anything about retraining these officers. And that's the problem. We got solutions for everything else but the problem. But I want to look at it because, again, it was introduced and now it passed the House, it's going to the Senate. And it was introduced by Rep. Karen Bass of California. And again, California is also the one that introduced a bill which required police officers to, they got it broken down, which required police officers to have a college degree of some form. I believe it's a 2-year degree minimum, which is pretty much a criminal justice degree. But the problem is they're still not going to be able to make the decisions that they're made if their training is the exact same. Because I had a conversation yesterday before I get into this, and it was with a young boy. He was, I hate to say it it was a young man. He was probably about 22, 23, and we were having a conversation, and I was at the gym because, as y'all can see, I'm a little fat for those that are watching it. And I had to show him an older picture, like of a few years ago prior to me hurting myself, of how I looked. And I said, yeah, I'm getting ready to train to get back there. And he was like, well, you're doing this wrong. And I was like, no, this is how my body responds to that, this, that, and the third. So I was showing him, no, I'm not doing this to get stronger. I am doing this to build muscle. He didn't understand the context of what I was saying. I said, okay, cool. You don't need a lot of weight to build muscle. You need reps to define them. You need heavier weight to build strength. Say that one more. You don't need a lot of weight to build muscle. You need reps to define the muscle. But you need heavier weight to build strength because the more resistance, the stronger you get. Now, that also works in real life without the weight, but we'll go into that. So he didn't quite get it. I said, okay, great. I use Lonzo Ball simply because I'm a Lakers guy, and Magic picked him second. And I pointed out that yesterday he had a 28, he had 8 threes in the game before. So I hoped he could relate to that, which he did. And I said, okay, here's a great thing. I said, well, when Lonzo Ball came in, he couldn't shoot from the right side of the floor. And then when he got to the NBA, he couldn't shoot from the right side of the floor. Why? Because of how he released his shot. Not a big deal. Not a big deal. It is what it is, right? But nobody made him, or nobody trained him to do it differently. No one required something different of him until he went to New Orleans. When he went to New Orleans, while he was doing the exact same thing, someone required him to be different doing it. What happens now? He was shooting 28% from the right side of the floor in college. He's shooting now above 50 from the right side of the floor on twos and high 40s from three on the right side of the floor. Why? Because he's doing the exact same thing, but he's changed how he's doing. His form has changed. His setup has changed. His growth has changed. There's been progression because he's still playing basketball. He's still shooting the ball. He's still an excellent passer. He still has great court vision, but it's enhanced because they took what he was doing and showed him how to do it correctly to be more effective. Now, I'm going to give you that exact same example because that's what we're requiring of a police officer, but we're requiring the training to be different. Do the same job, just need to be done effectively. That's the request. Now, that's the thing that I'm asking for. I hope and I believe that's what most people are asking for because nobody hates cops. Everybody hates bad policing. And I think that's the gray line that everybody's falling into. Now, I'm going to read the summary for which they call, I hate that they call it this, but it's HR 1280. And it's the Police Reform Bill of 2021. And it's for the Judiciary, Armed Services, Energy, and Commerce. It went to the Senate on March 9th, 2021. And there have been 2 roll calls for it. There has not been a vote on this. And the bill addresses a wide range of policies and issues regarding policing practices and law enforcement accountability. I'm going to stop right there because I did a video, I think I was on UTEP's campus, and that had to be at least almost 2 years ago now. But I talked about how most police departments are trying to destroy police records because I have a young man friend of mine. We were talking, and he was telling me about an issue that he had with a suspect because he's a police officer. And he was like, man, I hate, these complaints. And I said, here's the question. I said, if you did nothing wrong, what does the complaint actually do? Because the complaint, just like when they have to write up a report, it has to be specific, right? He said, yeah. I said, so doesn't the complaint have to be specific and talk about something that you did specifically? He said, yeah. I said, and don't there has to be some type of proof from it? He said, yeah, I got video. I said, then what are you worried about? And he got quiet because it was just an idea that was etched in his head that if somebody complains on him, he must have done something wrong. But if you look at it from the eyes of understanding, if you're doing nothing wrong, why do you give a shit about a complaint? Because if somebody's telling you, oh, when you said this, who cares? Because I probably said it anyway. But if it's not wrong, who cares? But that was the context because, again, they're trained a different way. But they're trying to avoid responsibility and accountability for their actions. Why? because they're being punished for doing what they're trained to do. See, most of us are not going to understand that because that's not how we deal with life. That's not how we're getting along. That's not how we're brought up. But the context of it is the exact same. So when someone says, I'm being punished for doing what I'm told to do, many of us married men can actually, well, I'm not married anymore, but boom, we can actually relate to that. Because a lot of times we'll be dealing with something and our wife will say, hey, well, why'd you do that? I'll be like, you just said, grab that. I grabbed it. Well, why'd you grab it like that? Oh, goddamn, I just did what you asked me to do. And we become befuddled on like, okay, why are you upset? What's going on? What the real issue is? And a lot of times we have police officers that are doing the job, working several hours overtime, a la Amy Geiger, and we've been told through research, working beyond a certain point, fatigue causes mental exhaustion. And now it becomes aggravating. Everything becomes more tumultuous. Everything is bigger than it should be. So that's when you have a young man that has PTSD, he's being engaged by police and not the enforcement that's supposed to be there, and they're agitated. They escalate a situation that shouldn't require escalation. They take someone's life. And here's the crazy part. Now you got more paperwork. Because not only do you have to deal with, you get your little paid vacation, but what if that family now decides to sue you? Because one of the cops that arrested me, it was the funniest thing ever, because during the trial, when he came up to testify about the arrest, he walked up to me when he saw me. He had the big smile on his face. He ran over and hugged me. But again, I'm supposed to be this horrible dude. Cop runs over and gives me a hug. And we sat down, we ate a little lunch, and he said the one thing that scared him the most was when he was sued. He said it wasn't because I did something wrong. It was because my supervisor told me to kick open the wrong door. He had the numbers inverted. I kicked open the wrong door. I got sued. My supervisor walked scot-free. And that was the thing that got him sued. And he said that was the worst thing that was possible. So now, imagine you took somebody's life. And now, not only are you sitting in front of someone else, but they now have your life in their hands. That can't be comfortable. It can't be something that you would be, I guess, willing to actually just be able to deal with easily. So I understand that. I get it. But here's a great part about that. The reason we want accountability is because of the oath they took. Many of them have no clue of what that oath actually means. So when you're talking about a reform act, the accountability portion was something that was supposed to be taken care of in 1976. Then again in the Open Government Act. Then again with the Freedom of Information Act. But we're constantly asking, can you give us the information that belongs to us? We the people. We are the people. We are the ones that should be. You know what? Many of them don't believe that they're actually working for the people. That's the problem. And even with a bill, even showing more accountability, because if you look at a lot of these stories that I'm getting ready to start doing, on a daily, you know, let me stop for a second. Let me stop for a second because I was asked to do something different. That was one of the things that was brought to me a lot whenever I was playing basketball. You know, they'll kind of catch up to what I'm doing there. Hey, Rich, do something different. So now we're in the studio. I have to do something different. I have to give you a little bit more. I have to give it to you in a different context. But I always notice the one thing that I have is I get irritated quickly. I have this trigger in me. And it's not necessarily police, but it's bad policing. And then when I watch it, and then it's over and over and over and over and over. And it's like, I hate, a lot of people want, oh, well, it's a black issue. Oh, it's white privilege. Oh, it's white supremacy. Well, brown lives matter too. And you know what? It's a poor issue. It's those that are making less than $50,000. It's those that are not willing or able to fight back. And the constant understanding of big bank take little bank. Because if I know 95% of the people I do wrong are not going to fight back, guess what's going to happen? I'm going to keep punching you in the face. I'm going to keep punching you in the face. Because just like I talked about, what if that 5 turned to 10? But now we look at these places of protesting, that 5 went down to 3. So 97% of their actions went unaccounted. Who is going to hold law enforcement accountable? Are we going to ask the police? Yes, I said that. Are we going to ask the police to police the police? Or are we going to require that they do what they said in their oath of office when they rose their hand, bow, I swear to God. So help me God. Are we going to require them to do that? Because it's our job to hold them accountable, because those who can fight should fight. You know what? Let me get back on. Because this is part of the reason why I don't do this every day, because I do get, this is the part of the videos y'all don't see. Those where the emotion kind of spills out, the anger comes up, because I don't want to come off as the big angry guy. I don't want that. But when you're talking about it, sometimes it's us. Sometimes we're the problem. Because when we don't fight back, we're telling them that, you know, that stupid shit you just did, it's okay. I'm not going to do anything about it. It's okay. And it's just like, I'm going to give you a stat because again, I'm going to get back on this bill, but I'm going to give you a stat because since 2015, September of 2015, police have not gone 48 hours without killing someone. Since September of 2015, police have not gone 48 hours without killing someone. Since 2015, police have not gone 48 hours without killing someone. Are you still mad? Are you actually mad? Do you want accountability? Are you actually requiring accountability? Because this isn't me, this is the Department of Justice. These are the facts that are being brought in from all across the country, all 50 states, and Washington, D.C., which is technically the murder capital of the world, but they won't show you that. They want you to believe it's Chicago, when in fact, Chicago, there is a lot of killing. However, D.C. is more. And we look at some of the things they've done. Because at the end of the day, we look at tactics. And we're understanding, you know what, I'm going to throw this to the side because I got a lot of notes and none of that shit means anything right at this moment because it's the understanding of what it is that we need to be doing. The whole purpose of my channel is to actually I want to make sure that you have the ability, not only the will, but the ability, if you so choose to, your mission, if you so choose to use it, is to stand up, throw down, and what are you willing to lose? Because a man that will sacrifice his safety for security deserves neither. Those who can fight should fight. What are you willing to lose? I really didn't understand that I would actually get this upset about this, because you know what, those that are watching the podcast right now, you can actually see it's difficult for me to not fight, because whenever I see this, it hurts to the core. Because before, actually at one point, whenever I was bodybuilding, one of the things I did, I actually used to watch police videos before I would go, because I would get so angry. Just get angry and just get disgusted. And I just go get ridiculous weights and just lift and lift and lift and lift and lift and lift. And I would lift myself until my body I couldn't move the next day. Because the whole thing was, I'm not going to be put in that position. And then I think about my children. I think about my nieces. Then I look at the 15-year-old that was executed in Oklahoma a couple days ago. And yes, I do mean that. The 15-year-old that was executed by police a couple of days ago. Because if you're doing the right thing, why are you lying about it? Or the 16-year-old that was executed in Greenville, South Carolina, where the door slammed on his head. Why? If you did the right thing, why'd you take 2 years to turn over the video? Because the cop is still working. If you're doing the right thing, why is your body camera edited? If you're doing the right thing, if you're doing what you're trained to do, why is it now? Why is it now that when we ask you to do your job properly, we're the problem? But training is not. Training is out the question. Why is that? Why is that the issue? Because I actually one of the questions I asked a police officer was the simple question, because it was the play on words for the most part. Because it's the stupidest shit I've ever heard. Because he goes, I said, why would you get upset with me if I ask you a question regarding law and your law enforcement, and then when something happens, I sue you? Why would you be upset with me because you did something wrong? He was like, well, if I didn't do anything wrong, this, that, and the third, and because I think it was a conversation where we were talking about calling a supervisor or the USB Sharp decision. And he goes, well, we're told 45 minutes. I was like, okay, cool. Because you hold me 45 minutes, you're going to have to talk to your daddy. And your dad's going to be whatever federal court judge there is, right? I said, because I'm going to sue the shit out you. And he goes, well, you shouldn't do that because of this and that. Okay, cool. Why are you not upset with the person that trained you? Why would you be upset with the person that you're sitting at it held across because it's going to be handled in court. Okay, if I handle it in court, why are you upset with me for handling it in court? Why is that the problem now? And you're not upset with the person that trained you. Why are you not upset with the people that you have to answer to? Why are you not upset with the people that put you in that position? And it's one of those things where I always talked about, even when the riots were going on, that our anger, our judgment was misplaced. And one of the people I actually respect with everything is Agent Zero, Gilbert Arenas. Because when the Trayvon Martin situation went down, Gilbert Arenas and George Zimmerman got off because it was around the same time I went to trial. George Zimmerman got off. Gilbert Arenas was asked specifically about the Trayvon Martin situation and the George Zimmerman verdict. His response was, I live in Florida. If I ever see George Zimmerman, it's on site. A lot of times it's lip service. A lot of times it is absolute lip service. Now, the reason why I respect Agent Zero, Gilbert Arenas, is because 4 months later, you can actually look this up. 4 months later, Gilbert Arenas goes into a restaurant, I believe. He sees George Zimmerman. Gilbert Arenas goes right back to his car, puts his gun up. Boom. He walks back into the restaurant and immediately puts his hands on George Zimmerman. Why? Because he doesn't have a problem with the Florida justice system. He has a problem with George Zimmerman. People went out and destroyed property, took up businesses out of their neighborhood. They went and took down black-owned businesses in black areas. Mr. Chauvin is still living nice. Mr. Chauvin got a new house. Mr. Chauvin looks real good in his suit on day 10 of his trial. So are we mad at the building? Are we mad at Target? Are we mad at those that decide to take it upon themselves to create something? Or are we mad at Mr. Chauvin? Are we mad at him? Are we really mad at him? Are we really mad? That's the question. You can actually leave it in the comments. You can actually, wherever you hear this at, you can shoot me an email. greatestnow@yahoo.com. greatestnow@yahoo.com. I love to hear it. I'd read it. I'd take pride in reading. Matter of fact, I would take an entire day to do a live just reading these emails. I would absolutely love to hear the responses to that. Why are we taking our anger out on something that is not what we're angry at? And it's one of those, and I'm gonna get in trouble for this one. It's cool though. I watch a young man by the name of Tommy Sotomayor, and I think I actually started watching him because he's an Atlanta cat, and I still got my ATL ears. But he actually talks about the fact that there's a war on masculinity. And in the context of this, one of the things that I was taught by my father, person I didn't like a lot, and you guys, I quote him all the time. However, I didn't like, because my father was there. His whole thing is, if I have an issue with you, I'm going to tell you I have an issue with you. They're your feelings. Do whatever you like with them. But they're yours. You can do whatever it is that you like with your feelings. I don't care. However, I have a problem with you, so me and you are going to address that problem. Why am I going to tell John about a problem he can't fix? Why am I going to Susie to tell Susie about a problem she can't fix? Because if I have a problem with Mark, I'm going to goddamn Mark. I can't go to John. I can't go to Susie. I can't go to Bill. I can't go to Kevin. I got to go to goddamn Mark. Agent Zero had a problem with George Zimmerman. He went to George fucking Zimmerman. All these people that blew up and threw up and tore up in Minnesota and all these other areas had a problem with David Chauvin. Nobody has talked to David Chauvin. Why? The police officers I've had an issue with it, I talked to the parents. We went to federal court because I had a problem with them. I didn't go talk to anybody else. I got to holler at your homeboy. Me and you we got to have a conversation. Got to. If I got a problem with you, I got to talk to you. If you don't want to talk, guess what? I don't want to talk either. Let's get it. Because at the end of the day, at some point, there has to be some man shit going on. There has to be some, I'm going to look you in the eye. I'm going to have this something that only you can fix. I have a problem with you. You're going to have a problem with me. We need to deal with it. That is something that does not happen anymore in our country. Why is that? Because if we're going to be able to stand up, that has to happen. Because I always talk about, if we're going to look the devil in the eye, we have to be able to confront that devil. You have to be willing to confront the thing. The thing that I have feared the most has come upon me. I talked about that in the Champions Mentality podcast. The thing that I feared the most has come upon me. And it's not that thing coming. Because Paul talked about that thing coming. The thing that I feared the most has come upon me. It's not that it's there. It's now, what do I do? What do you do right now? Because that's why the body has two natural reactions, two natural responses. Am I going to fight or am I going to run? That's it. That's why the brain only remembers pleasure and pain. We're very simple. In a complex computer, we have two responses, two reactions. And yes, both of those are different. We're either going to fight or we're going to run. It's either going to bring us pleasure or we're going to have to go through pain. What are you willing to lose? Because if we want accountability, we're going to have to require accountability. We're going to have to be willing to lose something for accountability. We're going to have to face that thing that we fear the most to get accountability. Because if you will not die for something, you will fall for anything. And if you will give up, you know what? These are the things I talk about constantly. But at the same time, what are you willing to give up? What are you willing to do to get to that next level? What are you willing to do to get a reform? Because again, the police are doing what they are trained to do. We want accountability from them. They've been trained to hide it. They've been trained to not be accountable. They've been, you know what, you spare the rod, you spoil the child. Now, here's the thing. We talk about it all the time. We see it all the time. We'll walk around, and there'll be some unruly child in a grocery store. Worst place, an unruly child in a restaurant. Why we get to see that? Because just like a child, many of us, we try to see where's that pain mark at. I need to know where the pain mark is. Because I'm going to give you, back when it was okay to spank your children, my mother gave me an ass whooping. To this day, I don't remember what exactly it was for, but I do know there is no physical way I could ever do it again. My body will shut down first. I don't know what it was. don't know. I know I can't duplicate it. Why? Because my body, nope, nope. My body is instantly that you getting ready to walk into pain. My mama been passed away at least 6 years now. She's been gone. She gone. However, my body ain't remembered it. I'm good. You're not doing that. Last time you did that, we got the hell beat out of us. Nope, we good. At the end of the day, if we don't fight back, you look at David Chauvin, because most people didn't even realize this. This wasn't David Chauvin's first incident with George Floyd. This wasn't David Chauvin's first incident with excessive force. This wasn't even David Chauvin's first incident with a trial. David Chauvin has had multiple complaints, most of which had already expired without investigation. Most of which were not executed because they did not follow through. What were they willing to lose? 5 minutes for a complaint. That was it. I'll give you 5 minutes. I'll give you 5. That's what I'm going to give you. I'm going to give you a strong 5. So did they want accountability? No, they just wanted to talk. Everybody's tough until you have to do something. Now, let me get back to this bill. I did enough ranting for right now. I got it out of my system. But anyway, the bill addresses a wide range of police policies and issues regarding policing practices and law enforcement accountability. Now, we have to hold them accountable. Damn this bill, because there are already bills in place that are not being enforced. Gun people. Anyway, it increases accountability for law enforcement misconduct, restricts the use of certain policing practices, enhances transparency and data collection, and establishes best practices and training requirements. Now, a couple of those BS. However, the ending part is something I would be very interested in. That's the training requirements. What are the new training requirements? What are we requiring for training? Because again, you remember the Atlanta police officer said we're being punished for doing what we're trained to do. And then I'm gonna go back, because I often spoke about El Paso, but I actually showed a video of an El Paso officer doing the policing horribly wrong. And I think it was video 23 of 100. But the great part about that was he was actually chastised and he was explained and trained how to do it properly. So he didn't have that issue again. El Paso also has one of the longest training, I guess, schools or something like that. I'm not sure exactly what it's called, but I know they have the longest amount of training than anyone in the country. Also have the lowest amount of police interactions and killings in the country. Sounds like Switzerland, too. The longest training, the least amount of killing. So the correlation is there, because they're trained to do something other than grab a gun. They're trained that not everybody's trying to hurt you. They're trained to not believe that everyone is a suspect. Oh, they're trained properly. Okay, anyway. The accountability for law enforcement misconduct, I would love to understand what that is, because right now, I believe in Texas it's 120 days of any complaint, and restricts use of certain policing practices. Well, we know across the country, they were disbanding the under the neck chokehold, as well as the carotid artery choke, which was done to George Floyd. Enhances transparency and data collection. That's where the Freedom of Information Act comes in. Because what I would like to see, again, haven't read this yet, What I would like to see in the data collection is the fact that it no longer stays at a police station, because we're still asking the police to police the police. And then we have the thin blue line. But then there was another conversation. I'll have that one a different day, because it was about the police, the minorities that are policing, and their union structure. But anyway, I'll go into that later. Because, again, we're getting ready to do something new. Rich, do something different. That's what I'm getting ready to do. And establish best practices and training requirements. Now, we also looked at Arizona. Arizona has, they're absolutely the worst police officers in the country. They had the 4th of July incident where apparently I was bullying police officers when I said that maybe if they didn't kill somebody every day, police, or saying that it's the citizens' fault that they're being killed, that, well, the people probably feel safer around them. Yeah, apparently that was bullying on Twitter. But anyway, I think, because even though Arizona, they have 8,000 hours training on just their handgun. I actually misspoke in the video. They literally train 8,000 hours on shooting, the one lethal weapon they have. Wonder why that's the first thing they actually do. Because if you remember, I believe it was about 2 years ago whenever I started this, I actually said, or I spoke about the way that somebody gets a taser. They have to be tased. My solution was, because you're building muscle memory. Why? Because the brain remembers 2 things: pleasure, pain. So it's more difficult for somebody to pull a trigger on a taser after they've been tased. So they're going to be more aware of the situation. They're going to go through the totality of the situation more. Why? Because their brain is going to require them to go through more. Now, you trust that vest so much, get that Ruger or Glock, vest up, have somebody shoot them in the chest. Get shot in the chest, now you go get your gun, and now you go on patrol. Here's the thing. I've never done it. Don't ever plan on doing that stupid shit. However, you can ask a friend of mine. We actually did it. And, the vest holds up. The vest holds up. But anyway, it's one of those things where the whole thing is, if you're going to require them to get tased because you don't want them just pulling out that taser all willy-nilly, why not require them to get shot so they can quit pulling out their gun all willy-nilly? Why don't you offer them a secondary option for hand-to-hand combat or some sort? Again, these are just ideas, because I've never been through the training. I don't know exactly what the training is, but I do know it's not correct. I know it's not proper. I know what they're doing is wrong. I have ideas, but that's all they are. There has to be something, but there has to be a change. Now, the bill enhances existing law enforcement mechanisms to remedy violations to law enforcement. Among other things, it does the following. Now, I'm actually going to go back real quick because it restricts the use of certain policing practices. Because even with New York being billions of dollars backwards because of stop and frisk, I've been told, and I've actually seen a couple of cases currently in 2020, where police have stopped someone and frisked them without cause, without being able to articulate, without anything that requires them, and judges have actually thrown out cases because they weren't set up properly. But that's one of the things that I'm hoping I'm teaching you guys, or will be teaching you guys in the masterclass. So if you haven't signed up for the masterclass, do so. And yes, it's a shameless ass plug. But I want you to understand something. Anytime we're going through these summaries, anytime we have these things that are there, ideas are what we want. Because the only way to correct the problem is to actually look at it and address it. Because that's why when you're creating a business, it's called a brainstorming session, because you have to do something that enhances. We see the problem. Let's see what we can do to fix it. So if I talk about the law enforcement accountability and I tell you you have to be the one to stand up and do it, that's one of the solutions. That is not the only solution, but there has to be something done. But here's the thing about the bill enhancement. The first off is the lower court's criminal intent standard, from willful to knowing or reckless, to convict a law enforcement officer of misconduct in a federal prosecution. Wow. I'll come back to that one. Limits qualified immunity as a defense to liability in a private civil action against a law enforcement officer. I'll get back to that one. Grants administrative subpoena power to the Department of Justice in pattern of practice investigations. You know I got to come back with that one. Now, it establishes framework to prevent and remedy racial profiling by law enforcement officers at the federal, state, and local levels. It also limits the unnecessary use of force and restricts the use of no-knock warrants, chokeholds, and carotid holds. I just spoke about that. The bill creates a national registry, the National Police Misconduct Registry, to compile data on complaints and records of police misconduct. It also establishes new reporting requirements, including the use of force, officer misconduct, and routine policing practices, stops and searches. Finally, it directs DOJ to create uniform accreditation standards for law enforcement agencies and requires law enforcement officers to complete training on racial profiling, explicit bias, and the duty to intervene when other officers use excessive force. I don't even know where to start on this. Because again, to go into the details on this bill, I guess here go the asshole part of me. Because it lowers the criminal intent standard from willful to knowing or reckless. The criminal intent standard, they're actually just saying now that they're going to put a little bit of onus on a prosecutor or a DA to convict a law enforcement officer for misconduct and setting up federal prosecution. Why? Because they have to follow federal law when they're doing their enforcements. But again, I've said this, and I was told that, no, that's not right. That's not what it is. Here's the thing. It still does not do anything that deals with wrongful death. If a police officer kills a citizen, period, wrongful death, and it's generally due to negligence, or in this case, they used the word recklessness. Whether it was willful or negligence. Just like the aggravated assault is a police officer simply pulling out a gun on someone. This is something that was explained. This was something that was detailed. It was something that I actually read out. Yes, I read it. I didn't make it up. I didn't just pull it out the air. But it's something that people also went back at me on. But it's cool because it's still in writing. And the pen is mightier than the sword. Now, limits qualified immunity as a defense to liability in private civil action against law enforcement. Here's the thing. What that actually is saying, that most people are filing it incorrectly. They're trying to sue someone. They're trying to sue Officer Johnson instead of David Johnson. That was an officer at the time of the violation. Because Officer Johnson cannot be sued, even without qualified immunity. However, even with qualified immunity, just like I talked to you about the case, I believe it was Malloy v. Hogan. I think that's it. I can't remember. It's right there. It's Malloy or Mallory. I can't remember which one it was because I'm rolling. But it doesn't offer absolute immunity as a defense. There's a separation between qualified and absolute, but the whole context is to not sue Officer Johnson, is to sue them in their individual capacity in federal court. So you're not suing a law enforcement officer, you're suing Don Johnson, who was a law enforcement officer at the time of the violation. Why? Because he had a fiduciary duty for your well-being. Now, grants administrative subpoena power for the Department of Justice pattern of practice investigation. This is where we go into character. This is what they're doing right now to David Chauvin. This is how we know that he's had multiple pattern or practice investigations, because there have been several violations. There have been several court filings. There have been multitudes of, well, that's horrible. No. There were at least 4 prior to George Floyd. So I'm not going to use the word multitude that we know of, because of the pattern or practice of investigations. Now, when we talked about earlier, which I actually covered, which wasn't the no-knock warrants. Now, the no-knock warrant is something that they just threw in there because the Breonna Taylor. And here's the crazier part. Most people didn't even catch this part of it, because I even spoke about the Breonna Taylor issue, because the no-knock warrant is to be executed at a certain time, which is generally going to be late at night or early in the morning, but it's probably going to be early in the morning than it is versus late at night, which would be, I think, 6 a.m. 5, 6 a.m. You want the no-knock because that way you don't have to announce yourself. Now, these jackasses they just had one story and said, no, we didn't announce ourselves. We wouldn't even known about Breonna Taylor because nobody knew for 2 days. It wasn't national news for 2 days, but it was the fact that they were insistent that they had announced and then started firing. And all the stories that they heard was gunshots. There was no police shouting. That's the only reason Breonna Taylor was actually looked into. Most people didn't catch that when it first came out. But the no-knock warrant itself isn't for the average citizen. It's actually set up for what they claim to have been looking for, which was a drug dealer, which was Breonna's, I believe, ex-boyfriend, who didn't live there. That was part of the problem, because they would, again, I talk about police officers are not designed to or trained to solve any crimes. But anyway, the chokeholds, which was, again, under the neck, and the carotid hose, I'm going to say that again, the carotid hose, which was the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu neck press that was placed on George Floyd. This is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu move, which is done across the world, because I've actually saw somebody in England using this. And again, it's 1 minute, 30 seconds max. Why? Because you're cutting off the oxygen and blood flow to the brain. Any longer than that, somebody's going to be brain dead. So whenever we're doing that, the reason why is because now there's so much news on it, people had to look it up. Now, the bill that creates a national registry for police misconduct, I think that's going to be a stretch, because this is also a big bank take little bank, because most of these congressmen, most of these senators are funded by police unions. They're in areas and they work directly with the police unions. Why? Because the police department is also a business. It's about revenue generation. So when you're compiling the National Registry, it sounds good. It sounds really good. So did the Affordable Care Act before it got passed. Then it looked like something that I had never seen before in my life. But anyway, this is something to actually say, all right, this person is not going to work again. Yeah, that's BS, because we actually look at a lot of times when these police officers are fired from one police department, they go off to a second police department somewhere else in the county or somewhere else in the country. Case in point is the young man who was fired in Florida for shooting at a college student and then going to Philadelphia and 15 minutes after being sworn in, shoots a young man in the back with no gun, and then saying he had a gun and forgot he had a video camera. And then we look at, that's probably going to be something that's going to be fought the most. And it directs the DOJ to create uniform accreditation standards for law enforcement agencies and require, one of them huge words, and requires law enforcement officers to complete training on racial profiling, explicit bias, and the duty to intervene when another officer uses excessive force. Here's the problem. I can tell you the problems with that now. Racial profiling. They're actually told everybody is against them. They're actually trained that everybody's trying to hurt them. That's part of the profiling. It doesn't matter about the race or anything. They're poor, they're trying to hurt you. They're rich, they're trying to sue you. Implicit bias. Now, I understand you want robots. I get it. That's why you don't hire smart people. But there are certain times your instincts have to kick in, but there's a way of doing it. And I always speak about my man, John. He's still a police officer. I actually talked to him a little while ago. He's still in Atlanta. And I always talk about him. John actually has been shot twice doing traffic stops. John still does not put his hand on his gun. John still does not ride with a partner. Why? Because he doesn't deal with fuckery. But John also doesn't allow other officers to do things that are not lawful in his presence. For that, John has been shunned in his own police department by that same blue line. Even when an officer does something to correct the behavior of another officer in that thin blue line, I heard it yesterday, and I should have wrote it down, which, that's on the floor now. He said, well, the next time there's a call and there's guns involved, don't look for backup. My question is there really a blue line if you'll leave your fellow blue liner or person in blue alone where there's a high probability that they could die? Are you really a part of a blue line? Is that culture worth the no snitching? Because what most of them don't understand is if you're out here doing something stupid, not only are you increasing the chances that something stupid could happen to you because of this action, but if I'm with you, I've seen it 1,000, well, I haven't seen it 1,000 times, but I've read a lot of stories where bystanders also have been killed because of the accident. You know what? One of my favorite movies is Boys in the Hood. Ricky had promise. His brother, well, actually, Ricky had promise. His brother, on the other hand, was the one that was always starting stuff. He stayed in the middle of doing everything. Ricky was the one who got shot first. Ricky wasn't doing anything except going to school. Let me go to school, get my football on. Ricky! But no, Doughboy was out here doing the most, and Ricky had to pay the price. So your stupidness is putting me in danger. So if I tell you to stop doing your stupidness, why do I then have to worry about if there's something going on? Why can't you just stop doing this? Why is stop being stupid a problem? Why is stop violating people's rights a problem? Why is me asking you to do what you're supposed to do a problem? And I said I wasn't going to do this, but I am, because I actually did glance over at it. And Jingy, because I love you. The question is, whatever happened to the presumption of innocence? This is something that I was actually blown away by in 2020. Because in most states, the presumption of innocence is not something that's trained to police. It has to be something that we require doing a vigorous defense. You know, the one thing that nobody wants to do when they're standing up to their bully, we have to require the presumption of innocence. It's actually codified in Louisiana. I think it's codified here in Texas. I know it's not codified in North Carolina. But you have to revoke all presumptions. You have to make them. Because I think that's where it lowered the criminal intent standard. Because I always talk about the reason why they lose so much in trial, why they don't want to go to trial, is because they have to prove what somebody's thinking. So when you lower the standard of intent, the idea is the painting of a story, but when you don't have evidence to support something, what is that called? It's hearsay. Hearsay is not evidence. Your feelings don't dictate law, but when you allow it to happen, when you allow it to come through, when you allow it to be introduced, you don't object to it. You don't even, the pen is mightier than the sword. You don't require it. It goes back to the law enforcement accountability. We want them to be held accountable. We have to require it. What are you willing to lose? Because if I have a problem with not being presumed innocent, what am I willing to do to be presumed innocent? I'm going to make sure you understand that I am innocent until you prove otherwise. Because remember, everything is on the accuser, not you. That's why you don't have to provide an alibi. You don't have to talk to them. You don't have to participate in their investigation. And a lot of times, I don't like dealing with nobody else's kids. If they don't belong to me, then I really don't feel like talking to you. That's why it's empty. I wish you could see here. It's empty. It is empty in here. It's me. Because I don't like dealing with anybody else. Because at the end of the day, I have to be accountable for me. So my requirements when you are around me, my requirements for when you are around me is that you be elevated. Because I had to tell a cop one time, and it was funny because he was being aggressive. I told him, I said, hey, man, take a deep breath. He goes, well, I said, hold on, calm down. We both going home tonight. It's just I'm going to have a better weekend than you. So when we got to the jail, he said, well, why'd you tell me to calm down? I said, because you're anxious, which makes you dangerous because you were in the middle of flight. And a scared man will kill you. A man that will not shake your hand means you harm. These are all these stupid ass lessons because sometimes they're not just, idle banter. Sometimes they're not just cliches. They actually mean something. Because the whole factor is understanding when I'm looking at this bill, unless it's something in the details, I don't understand. Because one part is Section 101, deprivation of rights under color of law. And it's Section 242 USC 18, or 18 USC 242. Willfully and inserting, they're striking willfully and inserting knowingly and recklessly. Striking may be sentenced to death, and adding, for the purpose of this section, an act shall be considered to have resulted in death if the act was a substantial factor in contributing to the death of the person. Words have power. I'm going to read that one more time because it almost went past me because I was actually getting ready to hit it with the float by. But here's a great part about it. Striking may be sentenced to death, and adding, for the purposes of this section, an act shall be considered to have resulted in death if, remember that one of those big ass words, if the act was a substantial factor in contributing to the death of the person, which now takes the responsibility off of the police officer and places it on who? The coroner. Because now the coroner is the one that determines one's cause of death. Say, well, the bullet in his heart was a contributing factor, but he had liver cancer. The bullet in his head was a contributing factor. For the purposes of this section, an act shall be considered to have resulted in death if the act was a substantial factor. If the act was a substantial factor. If the act was a substantial factor. Words have power. So again, that part, I'm pretty sure that's not one of the things that they're trying to get taken out. Section 102 is qualified immunity reform. It shall not be a defense or immunity in any action brought under this section against a law enforcement officer or in any action under any source of law against a federal investigator or law enforcement officer. 28 U.S.C. 2680, Title H. The defendant was acting in good faith, or the defendant believed, reasonably or otherwise, that his or her conduct was lawful at the time when the conduct was committed. Let me go back to the conversation I had with the police officer. We're being punished for what we were trained. We were being punished for how we were trained. The defendant was acting in good faith. Remember I talked about good faith, clean hands. They took out willful intent and put knowing and reckless. So they're only dealing with one of the two parts, willful and ignorance of qualified immunity. But understand, words have power. What they've now done, the defendant was acting in good faith, or the defendant believed, reasonably or otherwise, that his conduct was lawful at the time of the conduct was committed. If he was doing what he was trained to do, that's expanding the immunity. Most people are not going to catch that. And that was funny to me because, oh my God, the rights, privileges, or immunities secured by the Constitution and laws were not clearly established at the time of their deprivation by the defendant, or at such time the state or the law or otherwise such defendant could not reasonably have been expected to know whether his or her conduct was unlawful. They're suing us. We're being punished for doing what we were trained. The qualified immunity reform actually expands that. Why? Because it covers that's how we were trained. Now it makes sense whenever you hear it constantly being uttered. That's how I did it as I was trained to do. I did this as I was trained to do. This is the cover that they're now using. Words have power. The verbiage of the if and the and. In this case, if and or, the three biggest words in law. It is now, again, I'm pretty sure this section is going to be left in because it covers the police, because all they have to do, this is how I was trained to do it. This is how I was trained to do it. So now when we talk about training reform, training is the problem. They're now giving them coverage to create a greater gap in accountability. Are we really trying to make sure we don't get that done? Okay. Oh God, this is wow. The federal data collection goes through the Attorney General. The Attorney General of the state may, through appropriate means, acquire data about the use of excessive force by law enforcement, and such data may be used by the Attorney General in conducting investigations under Section 210401. This data may not contain any information that may reveal the identity of the victim or the law enforcement officer. This data may not contain any information that reveals the identity of the victim or the law enforcement. I have no clue why they would want that out, considering the state's attorney general I think most of this is a ruse. It's just to kind of play down what's in it. Oh, we don't want that. No, we don't want that, because even in the section 210402 of the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994, because it's been in place, which is codified as 34 USC 12602. Oh my God. Anyway, Law Enforcement Trust and Integrity Act. I'm looking at this mostly, there is nothing. The accreditation the Attorney General shall perform is an initial analysis of existing accreditation standards and a methodology developed by law enforcement accreditation organizations nationwide, including national, state, regional, and tribunal accreditation organizations, such as an analysis shall include a review on the recommendations of the final report of the President's Task Force in 21st Century Policing, issued by the Department of Justice in 2015. The more and more I read this, I become more and more dumbfounded. Now, I'm going to say this because a couple of these are things that are actual issues. The early warning systems and related intervention programs. Now, what happens is, we talked about the long hours, because I actually had one guy that said, there's no way a police officer makes $100,000 a year. And I told him, I said, well, yeah, your base salary they start off at maybe 45. So after 3 years, most police officers are making more than $100,000 a year because they're working a lot of overtime. Now, what happens is, just like I spoke about, and I use Amber Geiger as an example, she talked about working 14 hours, which was 6 hours overtime, and how she was mentally exhausted. Her mental exhaustion caused her to go into somebody else's apartment, which she had a key to, and kill someone that she had relations with. But at the end of the day, there were early warning signs related Yeah, the interventions. There should have been something there. When you have police officers that, such as Arizona, I gave, I think, 5 examples of officers that have killed multiple people in Arizona and are still working. Those are early warning signs. When you have officers that are constantly being accused of misconduct, those are early warning signs. And there needs to be something done. I don't care what it is, but something needs to happen other than them continuing to work and doing the wrong thing. Alonzo Ball's jump shot. Now, you also have a lot of civilian review procedures. Here's the problem. They don't know law either. They don't know what these police officers can and can't do, and they're civilians. So what are they basing their decisions on? Oh, what they're programmed to believe is okay. Now, traffic and pedestrian stop search procedures. It was written in, I believe it was the 70s, what they can and can't do. Terryville, Ohio, Delaware v. Prowse, and because they can't figure out or be trusted with determining what probable cause is, they have these things called supervisors. They also have to get consent from either you or a judge. I don't understand why these are issues. Then data collection and transparency, that's Freedom of Information Act. Quit trying to throw stuff away, because if you're doing the right thing and I'm supposed to trust you, why are you hiding stuff? Because again, what kills me is I asked a man the other day, because he actually said, "Oh, you're a cop hater because of this." I said, "Okay, cool. I got a question for you." I said, "How many times can a child lie to you before you chastise him?" He's like, "Well, if I find out my child lied to me," I said, "So why would you hold your child a higher standard than you hold a police officer?" And he got quiet. I said, "All right, let's take it off the child, because that was mean. That was a little below the belt." I said, "How many times can your wife not answer a question that you ask her directly? Like, where you been last night?" He got quiet. I said, "Well, why would you hold your wife and children at a higher standard than you do a police officer, which you're telling me to just openly trust? I don't know him. You know your wife and you know your child. If you wouldn't accept it from them, how are you going to accept it from someone else? If I can't accept that from my child," because I tell everyone like this. I rule my house as a dictatorship. It is I'm Chris Tucker. I'm the emperor. I'm the president. I'm the king. It's Richonia. You don't like it? Cool. I'm not even proud. I don't even have any issues with it. You just don't have to come there. Because right now, World Play Studios, right at this moment, is Richonia. I'm the only one here, so my rules count. That's it. I'm not going to listen to somebody else for some outside shit. No, this is me. You cannot have a conversation with me about me. So when you're telling me to just openly trust somebody and openly just do this and openly do that, I cannot put them at a higher standard than I hold myself. If I'm not going to let my child get away with it, I damn sure am not going to allow somebody that I don't know to do some fuck shit. No, I love him. I don't know you at all. I love her. I don't know you at all. In God we trust, everybody else pays cash. And if that instance, if you love your boy, hit that Cash App, hit that PayPal. I love all you guys. But again, we're understanding this. It's the things I think are going to, again, I don't know. But I think the thing that's going to be addressed the most is going to be the use of force procedures, because, again, that's already been addressed. The civilian review boards, I think that's going to slide by. The stop and search procedures. Now, I think that's going to be slightly tweaked, but it's pretty much going to be business as usual. The problems are going to come in when you talk about data collection and transparency. Because, again, we're understanding this. It's the things I think are going to, again, I don't know. But I think the thing that's going to be addressed the most is going to be the use of force procedures, because, again, that's already been addressed. The civilian review boards, I think that's going to slide by. The stop and search procedures. Now, I think that's going to be slightly tweaked, but it's pretty much going to be business as usual. The problems are going to come in when you talk about data collection and transparency. There's nothing that's going to change about that. They're going to fight harder about covering up what they're doing. Why? Because they know they're doing wrong. Because just like a child, you tell them not to eat in your room, you leave the house, you come back, guess where that plate is? Under the child's bed. Why? It's not because the child's a bad child. It's because the child has figured out, I got to wait for them to do something else because I have to become part of the cover-up. Because just like I even talk about men, the reason why men don't get away with stuff is because we care more about the crime than we do the cover-up. That's why the women get away with a lot of stuff, because they care about the cover-up. Right now, police officers are worrying about the cover-up. They don't give a shit about the crime. They care about the cover-up because they're not being punished for the crime. They haven't been punished for a long time. The administrative due process requirements, again, that's not going to be an issue because they're not being punished for what they're doing wrong. They're given an excuse of, that's how I was trained. The youth justice and school safety. Now, I'm just going to touch on this because I know most of you don't care about what's going on with the kids or how it's going on with the kids, because my least viewed videos are ones that are talking about children. And it's understanding that they are criminalizing elementary school children and their acts. Now, certain actions, to certain extents, absolutely. But for the most part, they're children. We have to figure out how to be better parents. Or hell, actually be parents. I think that would be a good thing. Anyway, the recruiting, hiring, and training. The thing that's not going to change, it's easier to control the stupid. It's easier to control someone that's not going to ask questions. Because, again, most people will have to understand, we're not holding them accountable. We're not pushing back. We're not doing any requests. So, therefore, what reason does the bully have to change? Because it's a business. And here's the thing. They are looking for practices to be reported on: traffic stop, pedestrian stop, frisk and body searches. Again, things that are put into police report, which are codified into to the state's organic codes. Because, again, that stipulates the police procedures. A lot of this is just not going to be challenged, simply because as long as it deals with having to turn information over, because the last part of this, Title II, most of this is going to be stricken. Title III, most of Title III is going to be stricken because it deals with actual retraining on stuff that has nothing to do with anything, and then the verbiage that they're using is to allow for a cover-up of it. And so the things that they're fighting against is the actual showing. And if you hadn't noticed, most of the stuff I'm calling out are not state practices. They're not state codes. They're federal codes. Why? Because federal law does not change from state to state, county to county, region to region. And guess what we have to use when we're going? They have to abide by federal law. Just wondering if you caught that. But anyway, oh my God. Okay, let me stop, because I was actually getting ready to kind of slow this down. I'm actually getting ready to close, but I want you to understand something. Whenever I talked about the non-lethal weapons, I actually forgot to actually give a conversation about this is an actual war on the poor. The poor and disenfranchised. That's why they're allowing ebonics. That's why they're allowing these abbreviations. That's why, because even I have to get onto Siri, because Siri will start putting slang into some of my text messages, and I'll go back and retype what the hell I'm saying, because the stupidest thing, if you take away my education, you take away my power. Because I can't apply an abbreviation. I can't use any you're taking away my pen. If the pen is mightier than the sword and all I have is that sword because you're taking away from me, then there's nothing I can do with it. Because here's the crazier part. Firearms, which include the shotgun, which include the Glocks, ammunition, bayonets. Now, if you don't think it's war on the poor, codified in sections 32901A under Title 49 USC Section 18. 3290. Grenade launcher, drones, controlled aircraft, silencers, long-range acoustic devices, grenades, and explosives. Who in the fuck is that for? Grenade launcher, grenades, explosives, drones, controlled aircrafts, silencers, long-range acoustic devices. If you don't believe there's a war on the poor, if you don't believe we are not setting up as a third world country, go back and read this, please. I am not speaking things that are not written down. So I don't care how much you don't like me. I don't care how much it is that you believe that I am a horrible person. Jackass, I'm reading. And the crazier part about this is you're giving. My brother said something to me one day, and it's one of the reasons why I don't talk about just everything I pretty much know on YouTube. And he would constantly say, stop doing that, stop doing that, stop doing it, stop teaching him, stop teaching him, stop teaching her, stop. Because it's like giving a handgun to a child. You don't know what's going to happen, but you know you're going to make the news. I even gave the Supreme Court case, Jordan, I believe it was Jordan v. City of Philadelphia. And he talked about the 104 IQ standard. When you look that up, that's someone that works at a fast food restaurant. The IQ of somebody that works at a fast food restaurant, police officer. Police officer, someone that works at a fast food restaurant. You don't think of someone working at a fast food restaurant as one of the high IQ people. You don't think of them as a thinker. You don't think of them as somebody that's a goddamn genius. But we're going to give this low IQ motherfucker a grenade launcher. We're going to give them grenades. We're going to give them explosives. We're going to give them silencers. We're going to give them drones. We're going to give them controlled aircraft. And we're going to give them long-range acoustic devices. And we're going to expect some good shit to happen. What are you willing to lose? Because that thing that you fear is going to come upon you. Are you going to go to fight or flight? Are you going to resort for pain or pleasure? Or are you going to give up all your security? That's all I got for you guys. I love you. More videos are coming. And I'll see you in a little bit. Supreme.